Aloha everyone, I'm Ruby Aliasin, your orientation leader for today's session, Time Management and Budgeting for Success. Before we get started, I'll be covering some housekeeping items for today's webinar. First, you should be able to hear me clearly. If you cannot, please note in the chat box so we may troubleshoot with you. Simple fixes include connecting your audio on the Zoom window, turning up your computer volume, or using external headphones. Second, please utilize the Q&A function if you have questions for the presenters or about what was shared. For most sessions, all questions will be saved for the end of the presentation. Additionally, participants in the chat are asked to be respectful of others and stay focused on the topic of the webinar so those with questions can easily be seen. Finally, after the session, we'll be uploading the recording of the webinar to the Visitays platform in the video section. All recordings will have closed captioning. Now I'd like to welcome and introduce today's presenters, Dr. Leslie Mitchell and Sabrina Fallejo Uganiza. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Sabrina.
Thank you, Ruby. Hello, everyone. It's so great to see you all again. I'm sure you're probably getting tired of seeing Leslie and I, but we're halfway through orientation, so the likelihood of you seeing us again is pretty high. So today's agenda is about time management and budgeting. So for the first half, we're going to go over time management, establishing a schedule, transitioning to college work, note-taking methods, retraining your studying, and fighting FOMO. And then Leslie on the latter half will discuss budgeting, various components, and establishing a plan. So as the quote mentions, we applaud you in taking the first step in kind of tackling these challenges that you're going to be encountering in the coming weeks. So good for you in wanting to start off college on the right foot. Okay, so before we begin, Leslie and I want to take a kind of moment just to acknowledge that we are not necessarily experts in this area, but we both have had much experience as both students and professionals with these two topics. So these are just really good tips that we have for you. And if you have your own, great. We would actually love to learn from you as well. Okay, let's start talking about time management. So the first part of this discussion or kind of topic is definitely establishing a schedule. So as a reminder to you, a full course load, or even if you're doing part-time or have taking classes part-time, this is pretty much like a full-time job. You are going to have to dedicate time both in class and outside of class. So taking seriously the amount of work and energy that's going to go into being a full-time student. So before establishing your schedule, reflect on when are you at your best? So we say this in to mean what time of the day are you at your highest performing? For me, I am a morning person. I work at my best between probably 5:30 a.m. and 8:30. I can knock out things like that, right? So off of my checklist, I can do boom, 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 boom. When it comes to at nighttime, when it comes around the 6 p.m., I'm just done. Like I'm mentally drained, I'm mentally done. So kind of reflect on when are you at your best to maximize that time. Are there other requirements of your time that need to be considered? So in addition to being a full-time student, also realizing that if you're going to need to work, that's also going to have an impact on your time management. If you're involved with a student organization, know that it's probably attending clubs and meetings, and then also doing community service. And then be wary too of being overly involved, because of all the organizations are then going to get kind of like the short end of the stick if you're overextending yourself. If working out is really important to you, making sure that you're allotting working out into your schedule to make sure that you're getting the kind of like that mental health, mental wealth kind of aspect in your time management. And also consider your family. Like if family is really involved with you, or if you are a caretaker for your grandparents or your parents, make sure you're also allotting that time and being cognizant of those types of commitments. And of course, folks have religious activities as well. Sometimes those end up on Sundays or on the weekends. So knowing that if you are wanting to do a presentation or work on it all day, sometimes your Sundays might be filled in the morning or afternoon. So just know that these are all just examples of other impacts to schedule when establishing your own. How much time can you reasonably and efficiently dedicate during the day? It's being realistic of, okay, you have 3 classes. That's probably maybe 3 to 4.5, 6 hours of class time. And then in addition to that, the amount of work that's going to go into reading, to studying, to doing your assignments and your homework. So think about realistically, how much time are you dedicating to all these other things? And then last but not least, what format will you keep your calendar and your task list? For me, I love Google Calendar. And I also love the little task list because it can actually be all on one screen. So if you didn't know, in your email, there is a little task list on the right-hand side that you can just type in. And once you're done, you check it off and it goes away. If you need to write things down on a Post-it, I know that's super gratifying to write something that you need to be done, or like finish reading chapter 5. Put it on a Post-it, let it stare at you on the wall. And when you're done reading chapter 5, you can take that Post-it and rip it apart. Whatever you need to do in order to know, 1, that you have something to do, and then 2, you can mentally, physically check something off your list. Do what's best for you. Okay, transitioning to college level work. So always be updated on your syllabus or syllabi. One of the leaders last week, I think it was Brandon, actually I think Ruby too, suggested getting all of your syllabi and then putting them down on a calendar and marking out when are the important due dates for exams and papers, so you can visually see when something is due. So if you know midterms are going to be in sometime in September, knowing that you have to already start preparing yourself that, you know what, that week is just going to be nuts. And then slotting already into your schedule the days that you're going to study for each of those tests, or going to start writing at least 1 page or a paragraph of that paper. Be aware of the projects that have several deadlines. So this is established to help you meet the ultimate deadline. So I believe in a lot in the English courses, they help you slowly write your large paper. So one deadline in September may be finish writing your proposal. What do you want to write about in English 100? And then the next deadline in October is going to be like, okay, like let's see all the supporting literature of what your paper is going to be talking about. And then the third, it's going to talk about your analysis. What about that topic is so important? And then at the end, when your whole big 15-page paper is going to be done, you pretty much wrote majority of it. All you have to do is just fix some grammar, fix some things, and make sure the transitions make sense and all that stuff. So just know those little projects are meant to help you be successful in writing those big projects. Procrastination on an assignment is the leading cause of an academic integrity and misconduct. It is, and it's procrastination is also the biggest way where it can make you do things that you wouldn't normally do. We've had students who were so focused on studying on another thing, they lost track of time and realized and show up on the first day, be like, oh, shoots, I have a test today, right? Don't get caught up in studying for one thing and not looking at another class and realizing that you totally forgot to study for that little exam. An exam might be small, an exam might be big in terms of the impact on your overall grade. So don't procrastinate and just don't cheat. Just make sure you are prepared in the way that you need to be successful, and how you study for exams and your finals. Last but not least, keep up with the schoolwork by studying every day. If you fall behind, you'll need to factor in more time to make up that work. So by keeping up with your schoolwork and making sure you're studying every day may be difficult for you because you're doing other assignments, you're doing other things, you might have work, but know if you allot it in your schedule, like today between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., I'm going to study for Physics 101, and vice versa. So make sure that you are somewhat studying every day for at least one of your classes. Yeah. So this could be us if you studied and did all that fun stuff, but instead you were having to do this instead. Look at all these projects and papers I haven't started. So join us on the left-hand side of your screen. Don't be the person on the right-hand screen, because you'll be a loner twirling around in the mountains. So join us at the football games. Don't come if you didn't study or you didn't do an exam, but because we really want you to engage in campus life and all that fun stuff. So come with us to the games. Okay, transitioning to college level work. Take notes on your assignments and readings while you were doing them. For me, I think a few folks know that I have ADHD. So in order for me to actually focus, I have to be doing something else, like writing, to make sure I'm retaining the information that I'm reading. So I'm one of those people that has like 30 million highlighters, who like writes in the book because I bought it, and just have notes and Post-its everywhere. It looks like a mess, but for me, it makes sense. Always go to class, actively listen to your professors and take notes, like real notes. Don't just sit there and just doodle and play, write your signature or play tic-tac-toe. Like actually listen to your professors, because actually the whole time they are saying things that are pretty important that will probably be on your exams and your finals. Don't socially multitask. What I mean by this is don't sit in class, regardless if you're in your residence hall or at home or actually in class. Don't be on your phone. It's literally only 50 minutes where you can distance yourself from social media. I know it's hard, but it's more important for you to pay attention, because at one time where you're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or whatever is going to be the one thing that you're going to miss on the exam. So allow yourself the ability to just be in class, be present, and don't try to think that you can do it all. Start long-term projects the day they are assigned. So for me, when I get an assignment, I automatically already start thinking about all the things I want to do for this project. And then it just gets your brain working, even if it's just like writing a paragraph of like your thoughts or where you want to go with a particular topic. At least that's one step closer to completing that project. Maximize the time between your classes. If you know you have an hour, maybe 2 hours between your classes, use that time to study, or use that time to start writing that paper, or organizing or writing an outline for your class or your class projects or whatever. Or even if you know you have a group project coming up, link up with one of your other students. Or even if it's like a chat or whatever. Utilize that time, so it's not just wasted time, where you think back and you say to yourself, like, it shoots, I should have linked up with my professor at that time, or I should have got that question answered, or you should have done something, whatever. You can fill in the blank. And then lastly, determine what resources you need in order to be successful, and actually seek them out. Kokua, as folks know, who's actually having a presentation at the end of this week, I think on Thursday. It's our disability program who helps out students. Seek out the writing center, the tutoring centers, even your academic advisors. It definitely makes a difference for students who seek out these resources and utilize them. It'll make a difference in making you feel more comfortable and in going to writing these types of projects or papers or whatever. You'll feel probably a lot more prepared going into it. And then lastly, sorry, can you go back, Leslie? And then one last thing, when you're in class, especially when you go back to being in a lecture hall and we're all back in person, please don't play video games. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting in the back of a lecture hall and I see students who are like playing video games on their laptops. For me, if you do that in my class, I'll come up to you and be like, can you stop playing your little video game? So please just don't do it. Just be present and just learn from your professors because your parents are paying for it or you're paying for it. So best for everyone. Okay. So in this next session, we're going to talk, or this next part, we're going to talk about taking notes. So in the chat, let Leslie, Ruby, and I know how you take notes. So in high school, think back, like, is it verbatim? Is it colored? Is it, yeah, how do you take notes? And I'll actually invite Ruby. How do you take notes, Ruby?
Oh, I take notes using colored like pens or pencils, and I write down things that I feel like are going to be important, but in like my own shorthand, so I can go back and review and don't have to write like everything the professor says.
Nice, nice. Okay, I see some folks coming in. Nice. Mind mapping. It's like you're reading my slides later. Cornell style. Cool. I think too, hi Kira, nice to see you. Okay, I love it. Outlines. Okay, some people do verbatim. Cool. Okay, this is great. Thanks to everyone who participated in that. Love to hear that those ways that you folks are taking notes actually align with our suggestions. So next slide, please. Okay, so note-taking methods. So some folks actually just do an outline. So they select 4 or 5 key points. That's part of their reading or even a part of their lecture, and they write in-depth subpoints under each topic. This is best used when you want your notes to be organized from the start, seeing relationships between the topics and the subtopics, and you want to convert the points into questions to quiz yourself later on. I think outlines are super helpful, especially if you need something a little bit more structured, and it's a good place to just start. We do have a flow notes, so not worrying necessarily about transcribing word for word, but jotting down topics and using arrows and graphics and doodles, etc., to format the rest of the content. This helps to draw connections between the topics too. However, this type of notation may be difficult to review later, so you may pair this method with another. I personally do flow notes. I'm one that's more of like a visual learner. So I'll do like the arrows and the dots, and then I'll change colors and highlights and all that fun stuff. Okay, next one. Okay, sentence. So this is basically kind of like a transcription. You're writing down everything that is said. It can be difficult to keep up with. And while simultaneously trying to participate. But if you can overcome those types of barriers and focusing on the key ideas only, this is probably the best note-taking method for you. These notes make it easy to review and study the ideas later. When I was a second year student, this is how I would take notes. And I realized that this probably wasn't the best way for me. I'm pretty detail oriented, so I would get upset if I missed a word without realizing like, oh, okay, I probably shouldn't have focused on what I was focusing on, pretty much on the different part of a sentence or the idea or concept that the professor was saying. So if you're probably better at like memorizing or remember what people are saying, that this could be a method for you. Writing on slides. I really appreciate when a professor actually gives their slides beforehand. A lot of professors do this by uploading their slides up to Lalima. This is helpful because it also, when you print it, you can provide, or you can print it with little notes on the side where you can take notes as the professor is going along. Yeah, with the speaker notes, sorry about that. So it's helpful because you can reflect on the example or what they're saying and write it down as they're going along. Cornell. So thank you to the person who suggested this. This one is very helpful. So it's divided up into 3 sections. So cue, notes, and summary. So notes are cues are key points helping you recall larger topics. Notes are dedicated to expanding the cue points, and summary is used to develop 1 to 2 sentences to simplify the page. So some folks approach this way, or the first part, differently. Some take notes in the larger column or on the right-hand side first, and pretty much as the professor is talking or as they're reading, their reading, yeah, they're pretty much doing the key points. And then on the left-hand side, notating the cues or the information that they want to recall later. And then in summary, they, in their own words, are able to summarize basically what they learned from that reading or that lecture. So if this is a method that is appealing to you, or if it worked for you in high school, keep on doing it, because it's going to definitely benefit you in the coming weeks and years. Mind mapping. So for topics, someone also suggested this, so thank you. I actually used mind mapping during my dissertation process. I am also a visual learner, so it's easier to think of a topic and then just branch off from it. So if you have a large whiteboard, you can use the whiteboards that are in Hamilton Library, or you can borrow one from your professor, or even if you want to do it on Google Chat or Google Hangouts, I believe you're able to have a shared document where you can do like group work and all that fun stuff with other people. So for topics with interlocking and complex abstract ideas, start off broad with general topics and then use branches to get to the sub-concepts. Again, this is great for visual learners. One challenge is it's more difficult for quick review, but if it's your work and you see things, you're able to look at each branch and be like, you know what, that's what that was, and I remember the subtopics, and then you can go from there. Because if it's your work, then you should be able to at least remember the conversation that you had with yourself. Okay, and last but not least, so retraining your studying. So with one of the suggestions that we found that was helpful is the Pomodoro technique. And this is really about goal setting. So if you're competitive or if you need little short goals, this is probably a really good way for you to study. So step 1 is to pick a task. So if that's trying to finish your 15-page paper or whatever, or just get started on it, set a 25-minute timer, work on your task until the time is up, take a 5-minute break, and then for every 4 Pomodoros, take a longer 15 to 30-minute break. So you don't necessarily have to do 4 rounds. You can do 3, but it's a guaranteed at least 1 hour or hour and a half that you are dedicating to writing this paper. It may not need to be 25 minutes. If you work better and like, okay, I'm going to goal set for 15 minutes so I can scroll Instagram for 5 minutes, do it. Or if you want to, work out at the same time, pick a task, set a timer, work for 25 minutes. And then when that's done, then you can go walk around the block and be outside, right? So if you need these types of goal settings, in order to help you get motivated and stay motivated, you should definitely try this studying method. Okay, and last but I'm almost done. So last but not least, fighting FOMO. I think we've all probably been in that position of, I wish I could have went to that concert, or I wish I could have went to that meeting, or I wish I could have went to the UH football game, because you had to study instead, or you had to finish an exam instead. So use these time management skills to build opportunities into your schedule, review opportunity costs of decision. So by not doing this, what are you losing out on? Weigh opportunities in light of your short and long-term goals. Yeah, that's actually pretty straightforward. And understand that you'll miss some things, and that's okay. These opportunities, hanging out with your friends, the likelihood of you being able to hang out with your friends, you can just do that the next day. Really take into consideration of what's most important right now. Be a better student now than you were in high school if you need that type of motivation. And that, yeah, basically, it's okay if you miss out on some things, but making sure that you're successful in school is our priority for you. Next slide, and ultimately we want you to be here on graduation day and not necessarily in the stands and cheering your friends along because you had to graduate the next semester. So graduate with your friends and be next door with them. And with that, I will pass it to Leslie.
Sabrina, I also remembered too that it's really important for students to understand that their study style is going to be different than the person next to them and based on their learning style. So there's a concept called your learning styles inventory, and really knowing that you're an auditory learner versus, somebody who needs to read something or somebody who needs to physically do it. Mm-hmm. And so remembering that you might take longer to study, you might not need as much time to study, you might need to write everything down versus your friend who just gets to listen to it on a recording. Who knows what it is? But really remember that there's no one way to study as long as you're finding success in your goals. Mm-hmm. There's no one right way. So don't compare yourself to other people because other people learn differently. So that's my added piece on that. Yeah. Okay, well, Sabrina and I are covering two different big topics today. So mine is about we're calling budgeting for success. So as a college student, you might be coming into UH and you've never managed your own funds before. Or maybe you've been working part-time as a student as well, and you've been managing your funds for 2 or 3 years now. So there's a variety of different people that are joining us in today. So we're just going to talk briefly and broadly about budgeting and how to manage that as a college student. So in my opinion, the first step in this success is knowing your financial situation. So first, what is the status of your funding? Do you have a static fund where maybe you have a lump sum that's deposited and there's no further funding that's going to be added? So for example, maybe you worked all summer or you're still working because it's summer, but you worked all summer and you're depositing this money into a bank account, but you won't be working while you're in college. Or maybe there is funding added. So you did have some money to begin with, but now you're going to be working once you get to UH, or you're going to be working wherever you're zooming in from throughout the semester. So you need to really have a good grasp on what are those funds look like? What kind of account do you have? Next, what are costs that are present that you pay regularly, but you have to anticipate? So, some of you might pay for your own car insurance. You might pay for a car. You might pay for your cell phone, things like that. So what are those things that you have to actually pay for? They're not optional. They are things that if you don't pay for them, you will not have them, right? So things like car insurance, your cell phone, things like that. And then lastly, what are things that are long-term costs that you need to remember? For example, you might have worked, again, a job this past summer to use that money for this academic year, but you won't be able to work again until next summer. So that money has to last you not only for the fall, but also for the spring. So how do you set aside enough money so you have it for both the fall and the spring, and don't wash it all out in the fall semester and you don't have time to replenish money in between? Further, you may want to have, you may have other costs along the way that you need to cover. You might have gifts, you might have travel that you're anticipating. Maybe you have to cover your flights home, wherever that may be. Or you have programmatic fees. So if you attended our study abroad workshop, you know that there's an application fee to that. Maybe that's on you to do, so you need to plan for how to provide that. Following that financial situation understanding, then you can start to plan pragmatically. And what I mean by that is that you'll need to start thinking about things that absolutely you need to pay for, much like tiers of importance. So shelter, food, and security and safety are the most important, period. You have to pay your rent, you have to pay for groceries, and those should all be paid for before you say go out, with the night with your friends or go out to eat dinner or whatever it would be. So thinking about those things, establishing those costs and how much they actually cost is essential to you. And this will be a little fun game. So I'll use your chat, and how about you estimate the cost of a gallon of 2% milk in Hawaii? Go ahead and enter in the chat. Somebody put $1.75. That is not correct. You guys are actually doing very well. It usually is between $7 and $10 for a gallon of milk, depending on the provider. So that type of thing gives you a brief snapshot in how expensive groceries are in Hawaii. We are an island state, so all of the goods that we use have to either be grown here or imported in. So you'll see those cost fluctuations throughout the year, but that's different than maybe what you're expecting on the mainland. So if you are a milk drinker on the mainland, you're probably going to pay less than $5 for a gallon of milk. Whereas here, if you found a gallon under $5, it probably expires tomorrow. So just know that the costs are higher. So that planning has to be more extensive, and establishing how much you need for that, how much you need for groceries and things like that is really, really crucial. Finally, after weighing your financial situation and the needs that you have, you may find that there's a deficit. In fact, the growing impact of COVID and other financial turbulence has caused larger and larger numbers of students to really lack the complete funds to cover their basic needs. We had a session earlier this morning called Student Basic Needs. It's recorded, it will be online. So we invite you to watch that, because that really covers a lot of different resources that we have, both at the institution and in our community, to help students cover that gap between what they have and what they need. And so working with those things. So things like the Student Basic Needs website, discounted rate for services. Sometimes you can get, discounted, well, we have the bus, so that's already discounted, but things like movie tickets or, or is there a cell phone plan that's for students? Oh, actually there is. You can get student discounts on things like Sprint and T-Mobile and things like that, or using those student discount websites that have, once a week, there's a different service that they have discounted. So seeking out those things, because those are things that you might need, and getting that extra 10% off or 15% off really does make a difference. Again, looking at CARES funds. So CARES are the federal funds that many higher education institutions were given as a result of legislative actions this past year and a half. So we have information on the MaNoA website that will give you links and forms and things like that for CARES funding. And then also considering government or private funding our services like SNAP benefits, work study benefits, all of those different things. So seeking out those offices or even being in contact with orientation, we can just help correctly direct you to those places. But all of these webinars, again, are recorded. So going back to those and making sure that you're up to date on those resources. Okay. So I'm going to cover a couple quick things about banking and credit cards. So banking, I think most of you probably have some sort of banking account, whether it's checking or savings or whatever. Now, the number one question that we typically get regarding financials is banking on this island. So there are a difference generally between banks that we have in Hawaii and banks that you have on the mainland. So for example, local banks, we have a credit union attached to the University of Hawaii. We have Bank of America. Now, again, I'll say that we have no preference over any of those. I'm just listing basic services on islands. And then we also, many of our students come in with what's really a mainland only bank. So US Bank, Bank of America, USAA. There are no actual branches on Oahu for any of these banks. So when you're banking, you have to consider, what do you need? Do you need to go into a branch? Do you feel comfortable doing everything electronically? Do you have fees for ATMs that you don't want to pay if you have a mainland only bank? So all of these things you really need to be thinking about when you're deciding if you want to keep a bank from the mainland or if you want to pick up an account from Hawaii. Now, the types of accounts, I'm just going to go over 3 or 4 basic ones. But in general, there's most students have what's called a free checking account. This generally has a low minimum amount that you have to keep. They are getting fewer and fewer because banks are not making money because they're free. So they usually have no monthly fee, no minimum balance requirements. They sometimes require a monthly direct deposit in order to get the free account. So some of you who, maybe you have Ohana who will be contributing money, that might count as that as a direct deposit. So look into that. Remember though, that doesn't mean there's no fees. That just means that there's no fees to start. So you can still get overdraft charges or bounced check charges, things like that. Those can still come with a free checking account. They also have interest-bearing checking accounts and premium accounts. These are for higher balances typically. So interest-bearing checking accounts is basically a savings account, but you get to write checks out of or use your debit card. Again, it's usually a higher level of money in that account. Premium accounts, again, much higher balance. Usually it is if you also have to have a minimum balance each day or each month that is typically above the normal student paycheck. Joint checking is also a very popular account that a student might have with their Ohana member. And essentially it's a bank account shared by 2 or more people. People can see how that money is being spent, where's it's going. Everybody can deposit and withdraw money. So there's no limitation as far as what those actions are. And we'll go over some thoughts on that later. There's also sometimes something called student checking, which is usually, no minimum balance. They might waive your fees. And it's usually like a pretty carefree kind of account, but do be careful about some of them because some of them I have aspects that not really conducive to what you might like in a checking account. So if other accounts you like better, you might want to choose to go with those. Also consider sharing an account with family. So I was alluding to this before. So there's pros and cons to having a joint account. So I think a main pro, if available, would be your family being able to quickly assist you if, you overspent, financial trouble or something like that. Again, that's if you have the resources. That might be a pro. However, A con may be that you have less privacy. So that person is going to see everything that you spent. So you might feel a little more restricted to spend money or do whatever because there is somebody else who would be able to see that. Now, the hidden costs of banking, I think, is most important. And I know that there's some, nationwide chatter on these types of things, but looking at what's called a monthly minimum fee. So if, for example, if there's a monthly minimum fee of $100 and you go below that, is there a fee that comes with that? So do you then owe $5 because you went below the monthly minimum? Also think about ATM fees. If you have a mainland only bank, they might charge you $2 every single time you go to a Bank of Hawaii ATM. But some mainland banks have waived ATM fees, or they give you a certain amount a month that you can do. So I know with USAA, they give you like a $30 a month ATM fee credit. So you can use ATMs and get that money credited back up to amount. So look at your bank and see if that's possible, if that's something that you're interested in. Also thinking about the horribleness of overdraft fees, or they used to be called bounced check fees, but essentially it's where your amount in your account is not sufficient to cover the amount that you're spending. So be very careful about this, because every single time that you go over that amount, you could be charged $20 or $10, whatever it is. So say you didn't know that you only had $2 in your bank account, and you go get a Starbucks for $5, and you go to Paradise Palms and get some panda, and then you wrap it all up with a burrito. All of those things your bank could have paid for, but now you have 3 separate overdrafts. So be very careful about that, and be very cognizant of how much is in your account, because that quickly adds up. Now you could potentially owe $60 on something that maybe cost you $20. So just being very aware of that. And lastly, thinking about account security. So your banking information should be kept as secure as something like your social security number. Your bank account number has the potential to provide access to your account to third parties who can basically liquidate that account. For example, the checks that you usually get with a checking account have your bank account number on them. So if you lose or somebody steals those checks, they now have a wealth of information about you on that check that could be damaging. They have your bank account number, the routing number, they have your name and your home address, and potentially your phone number. Additionally, your debit or credit card has direct access to your bank account. So if somebody got a hold of your debit account or your debit account number, they could potentially enter that information and use it. So just keeping them very close. I know I'm probably saying things that everybody knows, but just being very aware of that, because those things can very quickly happen in the electronic age, and all of a sudden your account is wiped because somebody got a hold of your account numbers. Manage them carefully, keep them secure, and monitor your account daily is very important. The other thing I would say too is, if you have a mobile banking account for on-island or off-island banks, make sure that you enable notifications to track any spending. So for example, I have notifications on my account so that if I purchase anything, I'm notified of that. So $2 at Holo Holo or $6.02 at Starbucks every day. All of those things I get a notice for. So I see that if there's a notice that I did not spend, then I immediately know there's an issue, and I'm going to follow up on that on my phone immediately. So enabling those notifications is really, I think, very, very crucial. All right, so credit cards. Credit cards are something that you might not be expecting as you come to campus and in college in general, because now you're 18, you can have your own credit card, you can start exploring what building credit means, but you really need to be careful about it and think of some stopgaps or some measures in order to help you with that. So credit cards can be beneficial. They can help you build credit. So gathering that portfolio of experiences so that when you get older, like me, you have that credit score to help you get things like mortgages or car loans or even nowadays cell phones. So you have to make sure that you're considering these wisely, but also managing how to use them appropriately. So a couple of things to remember. One is don't have a late payment. Late payments are a negative on your credit report, and they show the credit card company that they can, it basically gives them permission to give you maybe additional fees or they could raise your interest rate or different kinds of consequences. So really making sure that you're looking at all your payments. If you cannot make a payment, you should contact your credit card company and see if there's any assistance with that. So asking them, can I make it in a week or can I make it in a couple days, things like that. So making sure that you're contacting them. So don't ignore it. It will not go away. Second, know where you have spent things. Track your spending. A credit card is not free money. You will eventually have to pay it, just like many financial aid. You will have to pay it eventually. So know where you are spending that money so that you are using it only when you need to and that you are comfortable with having to pay that whenever it's come due. Now, another thing is interest. There is a cost to credit. So when you're looking at, if you say you have a $5,000 balance on a credit card and it has a 20% annual percentage rate, which is probably average. I've seen things as high as 22, 23%. If you pay $150 a month, it will take you 50 months, 50 months to pay off that $5,000 balance. And by the way, if you only make a $150 payment, you're going to end up paying $2,300 in interest. So your $5,000 balance is now costing you $7,300. So do know that it's not free money. You will eventually have to pay it. And the longer you take to pay it, it will cost more to you. So really making sure that you're tracking those spendings, you're taking it in the interest and understanding where that's going. Now, before we're going to briefly talk about this budgeting. So these are things that should be a part of your budgeting each month. So rent, we've already talked about rent, food. Some of you have cars and car insurance. Again, we don't think a car is really necessary on the island, but some students do choose to have it. Renter's insurance if you live off campus. Some students will be paying tuition and fees and things like that. Most students will eventually be paying tuition and fees. Any credit card bills, your cell phone, utilities if you live off campus, and then what I term as flexible expenses, restaurants, clothing, school supplies, entertainment, gas for your car, laundry, toiletries, and then travel and savings. And what I'll do too is I'll save this in the resources. So essentially I made a spreadsheet. And so I've broken everything into daily, monthly, and semester. And so if you look up here, this top section is income. So this is your intake. So jobs you are usually paid bi-weekly or weekly or monthly. Sometimes I'm paid monthly, but sometimes you're also paid a day. If it's hourly, you might be paid every day, or maybe you're babysitting or nannying or something like that. You might be paid every day. Intake from your family might be every month or every semester if you receive it. And then financial aid, sometimes you have money that is extra that you might get, and that's paid typically on a semester basis. Then the second section is all the fixed expenses. These are things that do not change. These are the things that you have to pay all the time. So housing could be monthly if you live off campus, or each semester if you live on campus. So depending on how that's paid out and how that's managed, you might not have to plan for it. So for example, if you live on campus, you might not technically have to worry about it because it's all wrapped into your bill and your bill is paid financial aid, whatever it is. But knowing where that money is coming from is the key part, if anything, so you can understand how to manage that cost. Food would be likely I mean, you might budget for it monthly, but the actual act of purchasing food would be almost a daily understanding and knowing, where are you spending that $5 here or $6 there or $3 there? All of that adds up. So understanding what that looks like on a daily basis is really important. Cars, payments, insurance would be monthly, tuition and fees, semester, and then credit card and utilities, if you live off campus, of course, would be monthly. So then telling all your fixed expenses, what do these look like? What are you spending each month that you cannot change? Any way you slice it, this is the amount that you're going to be spending every month or every day, every month, or every semester. Then these are the extras: restaurants, going clothing shopping, school supplies. Maybe you need art supplies. Do you figure this in, or how do you pay for that? Entertainment. I don't think people go see movies anymore, but maybe, going to a concert or going to the bar or something like that. Gasoline or transit costs. Laundry. If you are doing laundry on campus, it's not free. You have to put money on that card. So how does that get paid? Or if you live off campus, many times it's not paid either. You have to use quarters or whatever. So considering that. Toiletries are the most often forgot about things. You have to buy shampoo and conditioner and, soap and things like that. You might think that, oh, this is easy, I don't have to think about it. But those things add up. Quickly, you're spending $20 on those types of things. And that's $20 that if you don't plan for it, it really can add up in the long run. Travel, looking at that from a semesterly or monthly basis. If you're going to visit other people, if you're going to on a spring break trip, if you're going to study abroad, all of these things. And then if you're lucky enough at the end, having savings left over. So then tallying these again, the total flexible expenses, how much is left over that you can now spend appropriately in these sections. Okay, and then this is the end of it. So you're taking the income, the fixed expenses, and the total, the flexible expenses. Total income minus fixed expenses, minus flexible expenses. And this should be a surplus, hopefully. It should either be $0 or a surplus. You do not want this to be a deficit. Again, if this is a deficit, look for resources now to help you cover that deficit, because it's really important to plan ahead so that you can be successful as successful as possible. So a couple more things to help you budget. So there are several websites that have budgeting apps, like Mint is a budgeting app. There's a couple others that I saw. Some are free, some cost money, some have easy integration to your bank account, some do not. Some are kind of smart to work with. Some you have to do everything. So just remembering that you have to look for these considerations. One, how secure is your information? Some of these use your bank account. So if you're going to link your bank account, you have to be very cognizant of how that's being used and to make sure you turn it off should you stop using the application. So those things to think about. Is there a cost? And is that cost worth it? Some of these are completely free. Some of them cost a little bit money. Like if you're paying $10 a month for budgeting, is it really worth it? Or could you just use a spreadsheet? Things like that you have to really be aware of. Is it intuitive enough that you actually keep up with it? I don't personally like entering every single thing that I purchase. I'm one of those people that I like everything to come from my bank account. So my budgeting app has all that information. I just have to maybe recategorize it. And so thinking about that, are you actually going to keep up with it? Is it compatible with how you think and how you want to budget? All right. So in conclusion, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So understand your situation, your financial situation, plan your budget, and implement it. Find a way to implement that information so that you can be successful moving forward with your budgeting. And with that, we will open it up to questions.
Wow, we actually went to time. So as folks are typing in questions, or if you thought this was helpful, it's definitely trying to prepare you for the coming weeks and years. But really, these are things that you should be mindful of. You know that you need to time manage, you know that you need to budget. It's all in the matter of how are you going to do it in a way that's going to make you successful? So hopefully this presentation actually helped you think about the way that you learn and the way that you study. And then outside of the classroom, what are all these key items that you're going to need to buy or be mindful of when budgeting both your time and your money or your parents' money?
Yeah, and I would say too, just like learning styles, your friends are going to be in different financial situations. So they might be able to go out and have Starbucks every day and, you know, blah, 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 blah. That is not you. And so don't feel like you have to do that as well if that's not, one, what you're comfortable with, or two, that's just not how you would like to spend your money. Maybe you could afford it, but you just don't want to. And so all of these things, remember that everybody's situation is different. Everybody's learning style situation is different. And so just worrying about how you manage yourself is really important, and knowing what works for you so that you don't get stuck trying to do what other people do and then it's throwing you off. So just remembering that.
Yeah. And these are all really good habits to start. Maybe you started them while you were in high school. Now it's time to refine them, because as you do get older and the more responsibilities that you have later with once you get into your career field, once you have more money, sometimes you feel like you can spend more money, but you also have to take into consideration like loans and paying off loans. And hopefully you can buy a house one day and a mortgage. And so your list of responsibilities of your finances are going to grow. So what better way to start honing in on how to make those work for both you and your family than to just start today, because it's fun.
It's totally fun. But also just remember, just because somebody tells you, oh, you need to get a credit card because it'll help your credit score, that's not absolutely true in every single case. I, for example, in college did not have the self-control to get a credit card. I knew that about myself. I would spend money here, I would spend money there, blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't get a credit card when I was in college because I didn't want that temptation to spend money and do different things when I wanted to make sure that I just stayed within my budget. So just because that's what some people say doesn't mean that it's always right for you. You will have time moving forward to build your credit score and do things like that. And so just remember, again, work with what is right for you and what fits you. And if it doesn't fit you, then try something else.
All righty. Seeing no questions because we answered them as we went, I will invite Ruby to go ahead and close this out.
Thank you for joining us today for this presentation. We hope you gained some helpful information from Sabrina and Leslie. If you have further questions, questions that were not discussed, please email your orientation leader or nrwo@hawaii.edu for assistance. As mentioned, this webinar will be published on the NSO platform, so please visit that page for the recording as well as links or documents mentioned by today's guests. Mahalo.